Hi, everyone. I'm here with another Back to Basics, and this time it's a little back to basics with poetry. And the focus I wanted to take today when it comes to poetry is perhaps a shift from something more traditional in the ways we teach poetry to really help students create heartfelt poems. Alok, who's an incredible poet, acknowledges that we are all poets and there are poems just waiting inside of us. And the traditional approach to teaching poetry is to maybe start with a particular form, like, okay, we're going to write haikus or acrostics or diamantes, or another type of poem that has a particular structure. And that works. And there are also other ways to help students uncover their own voices through poetry. So we can start off by sharing some examples of poems that we love and poring over them together and imagining the images that come to our minds as we read them. And then maybe we'll write some poems together as a community. And as we write these poems together, we're teaching students how they might write some on their own. And I have 3 different ways that you might consider playing around with words in order to create some poems. So I have 3 different ideas for you. The first one comes from my college days when we had Magna poetry. Perhaps you've had that too, where it's words that are like 1 word per magnet. And we would manipulate the words and leave them on like the door to each other, our roommates, and we would make these poems and leave them for one another, or on the fridge or something. I still think that that's a really useful way of beginning some poems. So what I have here is a baggie full of words. I might not have this many words with students, but maybe in pairs or maybe as a whole class, we would take a few words out and explore them and decide which ones you might want to use in a poem and which words we might also add. So I actually pulled out 7 words that inspired me to write a poem. The words were joyful, we, slowly, ourselves, cheers, who, and anyone. And I added a few of my own words, and this is the poem I created. I don't have a title for it yet. I just put it together. I'll read it to you. Anyone who cheers ourselves slowly on, we claim our joy. Anyone who cheers ourselves slowly on, we claim our joy. Now, I'd have to count the syllables to find out if that's actually haiku. It kind of sounds like it. But whatever the case, I chose the words and I modified some of the words. Like I had picked out joyful, but I decided to just use joy. And then I added some of my own words as well. And so using some words that are already put down on little cards like this can be really fun for kids to select them and create a poem and add some of their own words. I don't know who said this, and I wish I did. One of the things I love to share with students is that poems are tall like buildings instead of flat like pancakes. So we take these words and we stack them in a tall shape, and that also makes us a poem. So that's my first idea for you, is to use word cards and to manipulate those word cards into creating a poem. And maybe that's just the first stanza, or a stanza I learned from Georgia Hurd in Italian means room. So maybe we create the first stanza, the first room of our poem, and then we can create another stanza after that, just straight from our head or heart. Or we can stick with that first attempt at the poem and let it be. When we have these word cards, another way of creating a poem is to pick 2 and make a 2-word title that can inspire a poem. So first, we can use the cards to make a poem, adding some of our own words. And second, we can go back into the cards and say, would this make a good title of a poem? And then I think about the words that I would write as I might compose a little bit in my mind to decide if that's a title I'd like to go with. So something like, oh, this is cool. I could take it the title, Slowly Ourselves. I don't know, I'm coming up on a big birthday this year, and Slowly Ourselves feels just about what's been happening over the past couple of decades. Or maybe I might choose the words, we kite. And that might be, so we kite together. I know kite is a noun, but I could change it to a verb and create a poem off of that. So the first way is to use word cards to create a poem, just like Magna Poetry. Another way is to take some of the cards and create our own titles, like pulling together. I like this one. Maybe Beautifully Ourselves. And that could be a poem. A third thing that I like to do is maybe take the title and write it down, or take a word, especially like a word that's social emotional word like community or resilience, or take an object or a loved one, just picking any word or two that might start our thinking. And then I just like to think about categories where I can come up with just a whole bunch of different words that I can choose from as I create my poem. So I might think about what colors come to mind, what feelings come to mind, what sounds come to mind, what shapes or images come to mind, and what comparisons come to mind. So I did this with the word courage. You can see I really wasn't worrying about my handwriting too much. Perhaps I should a little bit more if I'm putting this on a lip block video, but I quickly just wrote down in these categories the different sounds that came to mind when I thought of courage: feelings, sounds, shapes and images, and comparisons. And then I used this almost like a word bank for me as I then went ahead and composed my poem. So let me just share with you. So when I thought of the word courage, I wrote down the colors reds and blues. I wrote down feelings such as fear with tingling excitement, a connection to truth. I wrote down sounds that came to mind with courage, footsteps and whispers and shouts, and shapes and images that came to mind, which were lynx, standing still, hands on hips. I thought of some comparisons: a tree bending without breaking. I thought of emerging from water. I thought of courage like a long lost friend. And then using that as my inspiration, all the words that I had written down, I didn't copy them, in the order I wrote them. And I just ended up with this first draft poem here called Courage. Let me read it. Courage. I take footsteps toward the truth. Truth like a long lost friend, found again. We link arms, stand still. We begin with whispers that turn to shouts. We are here. I am here. Now, the poems will sound different if you're doing this as a community, writing poems all together as a community. They'll sound more kid-like the ones that I wrote sound like me. But the same process can be followed to find those heartfelt poems and begin to write them down. So the three different, processes that I shared with you is first, maybe try out a collection of words like Magna Poetry and pull out a few, arrange them, add some of your own words, and see what poems bloom from that, because poems do, they come. It's quite amazing, and it's such a fulfilling process as well. The second thing you might do is use those same word cards and create titles of poems. Those can be silly, those can be fun, those can be profound. And then write a poem from there. And if you decide to, with that title, you might start by creating just a collection of words here, and having those collections kind of focus around colors, feelings, sounds, shapes and images, and comparisons. And then using that to inspire a poem in and of itself. It's really a beautiful process, and one that when we really look at the process for creating heartfelt poems, there's a new appreciation for poetry and the role it plays in our lives. When we realize that there's really a poem out there for everyone, and there's a poet within all of us, we let the poems do the work that they're meant to do, and we share our words with the world. So I hope you enjoy creating poems with your students, and I hope that some of these ideas were inspiring for you.